All right, guys. So we are going to be talking about designing an aerobic endurance program today. Getting into it, an aerobic endurance training program must be specialized for the athlete. Outcomes of the aerobic endurance program should be specific to the athlete as an individual. And an example of that would be a program focused on improving running economy will look different than a program designed for improving lactate threshold. And again, a program designed for a soccer athlete who needs to run, let's say, 8 kilometers per match versus a basketball player. Their aerobic endurance programs are going to look different. A basketball player is going to look more to improve that lactate threshold versus a soccer player maybe looking to improve running economy, endurance, etc. So designing an aerobic endurance program, there's going to be 5 main steps involved with that. And that's mainly exercise mode, training frequency, training intensity, exercise duration, and exercise progression. So step one, exercise mode. What is the mode? The specific activity performed, cycling, running, sprinting, swimming. Mode should be as similar possible to the athlete's sport or competition, right? Swimmers swim, cyclists are going to cycle. The more specific the mode of aerobic training, the more performance benefits will occur, right? So again, in the off season, we can't, which we'll get into later, but cross training is definitely applicable. But generally speaking, we want to stick to sport specific, especially as we're building up to competition. But for athletes that participate in multiple aerobic based sports or regular activity in general, and are looking to implement aerobic training, using a variety of modes is possible and probably beneficial, especially for your average individual who's looking just to get into aerobic training. Walks, bike rides, swimming, all of it, generally good things as well. All right, so step two, training frequency. Frequency is defined by the number of training sessions per day or week. And this depends on variables like exercise intensity, duration, training status of the athlete, and specific season of the athlete, specific sport as well. Sessions with higher intensities may require less frequent training as well as less duration, but this will allow for appropriate recovery for the intense session. Too much frequency, getting up to 5 or more, as the book indicates, can increase the risk of injury, illness, as well as the potential for overtraining. Too little training will not result in positive adaptations to the body. More than twice per week, again, as the book indicates, recovery is essential to an athlete to derive maximum benefits from the subsequent training session. Performance generally improves following appropriate recovery. Recovery includes sleep, rehydration, and replenishment of glycogen stores and other fuel sources. Training intensity is step three. Adaptations are generally specific to the intensity or effort expended during a given training session. Higher intensity aerobic training exercises increase cardiovascular function, respiratory function, improves oxygen delivery to working muscles, as well as recruit more type 2 fibers, which allows for increased power. So for training power in an aerobic activity, looking at sprints, hill sprints, again, those higher intensity activities. And exercise intensity that is too low will not cause overload to the body as, and cause the physiological adaptations we need within our specific desired systems. Exercise intensities that are too high can lead to fatigue and ineffective training. Ideal measurement of intensity is to monitor oxygen consumption for the percentage of VO2 max. This is followed by periodical blood lactate measurements for its relation to lactate threshold. But when we don't have equipment, which is generally most of the time when we're working with athletes, heart rate, rating of perceived exertion, RPE, metabolic equivalence, power measurement. So heart rate, the most widely used method of assessing intensity. There is a close relationship between oxygen consumption and heart rate, and between 50% to 90% of functional capacity, VO2 max, is an individual's heart rate reserve. So this would be the difference between a maximum heart rate and the resting heart rate. Using the age predicted estimated maximum heart rate, this is ideal when lab equipment isn't available. So 2 main methods to calculate this. I'm not going to go through them top to bottom, but the Carvonen method as well as the percentage of maximal heart rate. And again, these are going to help us calculate heart rate and our target heart rate for our athletes, usually in a range of that, and it's totally fine. So RPE, ratings of perceived exertions, it can be used to assess an athlete's perception of intensity for a given exercise, influenced by many variables, however, age, sex, environment, but it's still going to be a viable tool, especially with our experienced lifters, experienced athletes. I'm not going to go through the entire scale, but it is listed, ranging from 1 being no relative intensity, you're basically lying down, to 10, maximum effort, 1 rep max, I can't do anymore. Metabolic equivalents, or a MET, it's equal to 3.5 mLs per kg per minute of oxygen consumed, and is equal to the body at rest. So 1 MET is body at rest. An activity that would cost 10 METs, or roughly 10 METs, outdoor cycling at roughly 15 miles per hour, and that would be 10 times the amount of oxygen uptake our body is using compared to rest. This requires the strength and conditioning professional to calculate maximal oxygen uptake to assign an exercise MET value, which the book did not give. Power measurement. Cyclists may use power measuring cranks to monitor exercise intensity. This is great for sport-specific cycling. It's generally used in professional settings, however, at the highest level of cycling, but metabolic rate is closely related to power measurements. Exercise duration is step 4. The length of time for each training session. The longer the duration of exercise, the lower intensity of a given exercise. So 85% of VO2 max is sustainable for roughly 20 to 30 minutes, and exercise at 70% or lower, that's steady state cardio, zone 2, if you will, it can be sustained for several hours. Step 5, exercise progression. Over the course of an aerobic training program, advances in exercise should be made to continue the improvements in aerobic fitness. Maintenance is something that can be maintained with minimal to no exercise at all for 5 weeks, and maintained indefinitely with as little as 2 training sessions per week. But when we want to progress, increase in frequency, increase in duration, as well as the intensity of exercise, but generally speaking, no more than a 10% increase per week in any given variable. So some types of aerobic endurance training: long, slow distance training, pace, tempo training, interval training, high intensity interval training, and fartlek training. So long, slow distance training, training intensities that are slower than competitive pace, roughly 70% VO2 max. Distance should be longer than race because it's going to be less intense. Athlete should be able to have a conversation during low, slow distance training, and improvements in lactate threshold, mitochondrial energy production, oxidative capacity of skeletal muscle, as well as increased utilization of fat as fuel. Pace tempo training. This is more sprint training, referred to as threshold training because we're trying to improve our lactate threshold, as well as running economy, generally 20 to 30 minutes. Interval training, close to VO2 max with rest intervals lasting 3 to 5 minutes, work intervals ranging from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, but 1-to-1 work ratio is the key here, and this improves VO2 max, anaerobic metabolism. High intensity interval training, similar to interval training, but generally speaking, less rest, and we are spending most of the time at 90% of VO2 max. And again, rest periods must not be too long, preventing the athlete from getting into that anaerobic metabolism through sprinting. Fartlek training, general speed play, work play, sprints, hills, generally long duration, 70% VO2 max run, followed by hill work, sprint work, resisted running of some sort. This helps prevent boredom. Application of program design to training seasons, 4 phases in the seasons: off-season, preseason, in-season, postseason. Base training, right? Off season, we're trying to develop base cardiorespiratory fitness, long duration, low intensity, increase 5 to 10% per week. Preseason, we're generally going to increase intensity, maintain or reduce duration, incorporating all types of aerobic training into the program, and getting a little bit more specific for that athlete. In season, this is going to be very sport specific. We're going to include competition or one rep maxing, if you will. Trying to get as close to competition ready as possible. Even more specialized for the athlete, and low intensity, shorter duration days should precede competition. Postseason, this active rest recovery is the primary focus. Low duration, low intensity, the easy cardio, easy movement to minimize the decrease of performance gains that we've gotten throughout the season, as well as helping recover injuries and trying to focus on those weaknesses for the athlete. That's it. Thank you, guys.